Hello, everyone. I am Adam from Watford Opinions. It's great to be back on the channel, and I am going to review the recent Newcastle versus Watford match in what was definitely a very interesting match, to say the least, because it was one of those weird matches where going into it, we would have wanted a win, and a draw would have still been acceptable on the road to a relegation rival. A draw is still good. But before the match, it was going to be, we should go here, we should get 3 points. But of course, Newcastle, the now richest team in football, they've already spent £40 million this transfer window. We haven't even spent a quarter of that. So there's definitely a weird dynamic going up there. But then, of course, as the match started out, Newcastle were a bit on the upper hand. We were getting a couple chances on the counterattack, as we're kind of set up to do, especially with our attack, with King, with Pedro, with Dennis. And I want to focus on Pedro later for a couple obvious reasons, and I'm also going to focus a bit more on the new signings as well. But especially in the first half of the game, it was Newcastle kind of with the possession, kind of asking the questions. Joao Pedro hit the crossbar. There was a couple little skirmishes through shaky back passes. Besides the crossbar chance, there was a couple other headed chances that went near, but I don't think they actually mustered a shot on target in the first half, if I recall correctly. But we were always providing a bit of a threat on the counter. But when it was halftime 0-0, it was kind of like, okay, this wasn't the best half we'd ever seen. This wasn't the worst half we'd ever seen. It was just kind of bland. Like, okay, second half, let's go out, let's win this. And then for the first couple minutes of the second half, it seemed like we were the stronger team. Like, there was Ranieri stuck a rocket into the locker room, and like people were playing a bit better. And then Jeremy Ngakia unfortunately makes that mistake to let St. Maximin in on goal, and then St. Maximin had to do some brilliant dribbling to get into the box and fire it past Foster. And I've seen some people say Foster should do better there, and I will admit I'm usually quick to criticize Foster, but it was a hard shot. St. Maximin did well to use the Watford defenders as a screen. Like, maybe other keepers could save, but I can't really blame that on Foster. And I'm a pretty big Foster critic, but I can't really put that on him. But it was such a shame for Jeremy Ngakia as well, because I'd felt the first half he'd silenced St. Maximin. The first half, Ngakia was brilliant. But it just shows you what a sport football is. One mistake, and that's what people are going to remember. Because then Ngakia came out for Femenia, cleverly came in for Kutska, Cucho came in for Dennis as we were trying to push for an equaliser late on, and we definitely had our chances. There was a King shot that was saved by Dubravka, which King should have done better on probably. It was a tough angle. He forced a good save out of Dubravka. Sissoko missed his sitter on a counterattack. Like, I know we've all become accustomed to Sissoko skying it 80 yards over the net, but that was one of those where it's like, you gotta at least get it on the frame of the net. But then 88th minute, Cucho and Kiko have some nice interplay on the right flank. Cucho plays it through to Kiko. Kiko with one of the best crosses you'll ever see. It was a pinpoint. It was a great play. Finished off by a pinpoint cross. Then Joao Pedro outleaped Jamal Lascelles and put it into the back of the net. Dubravka, it's full stretch, couldn't do anything of it. Then, of course, you have to love Pedro's celebration. The Newcastle fans were on his back the entire game, and instead of going crazy for the celebration, he does the cup the ears. Like, you see that, and I love Pedro. So, I mean, just the feistiness he plays with. He has those bit of antics, but he's not too much of an antic player, if that makes any sense. Like, he'll have that feistiness. Like, he'll step up to Trippier when Trippier took down Dennis. He'll let his presence be known. He'll say, like, I might be 20, but I'm not a pushover. Like, I'm going to push you over before you push me over. But Pedro, I'll first focus on him, and then I'll move to the new signings. Pedro, I mean, he even in the first half when we didn't really muster too much on target, Pedro still looked really good. He was dropping into the lanes really well to spur counterattacks. He was getting into that more center forward rather than striker position to really bring his teammates into the play. And that's what we want to see from Pedro. His dribbling is really good. He's able to distribute it wide really well. That header to not win the game, but to equalize late on, which in a sense felt like a sort of victory. I know it wasn't the 3 points, but it was a goal that, as of now anyways, it's a goal that's keeping us above the bottom three. Knock on wood, but at the end, no pun intended. But in reality, that goal is keeping us above Newcastle, above Norwich, and right now we're 17th, and we have to take it game by game. And 1 point, considering we were close to getting none, is better than none at all for sure. So Pedro, he played really well, and I mean, he showed what he was capable of bringing to the table on multiple cameos this season, especially in the FA Cup match against Leicester. So we were like, okay, he has to start. He starts, scores the equalizer, and there you go. So I think Pedro he's undroppable. And then to the new signings, I think all three were amongst the best players today. Kamara, I do feel he took a tiny bit to warm up. He had a couple of arrive passes to start with. He was a bit out of position, but after 10 or so minutes, he was right on top of it. I think he hadn't played a match since November, if I recall correctly, and that's when he fully lost out his place to Melvin Bard at Nice. Don't hold me to that, but it took him a couple minutes to shake off the rust, but once he did, he was right up there. I mean, it was a better left back performance I've seen from a Watford left back in a really long time. He offered a lot going forward. Defensively, he was sound. He had good pace, good dribbling, good accuracy with his passes, and I mean, he'll be, even when Messina comes back, I think it's Kamara's starting spot. Then in the midfield, Edo Kayembe, we said we needed a defensive midfielder. We said we needed someone to stand in front of the front line, be able to help spur on attacks, transition defense to attack, but just have someone who's a true defensive midfielder. I mean, Kayembe definitely seems to be, like, he could be that guy. Between Samir Kamara and Kayembe was the January signing with the least information known about him, just because he's still pretty young. He didn't have the largest sample size to examine from, played in Belgium, so there was a bit of question marks surrounding him. We signed him for around £4 million, but we really didn't, or at least the average fan didn't know what to expect. But he comes in and puts in an absolutely stellar performance from the first minute to the last. I mean, driving runs forward, composure, great eye. I mean, it was just a great debut performance altogether for Kayembe. And then for the last debutant, we'll talk about Samir in the back line. I mean, I tweeted it earlier, maybe a slight overreaction, but maybe not, considering we haven't kept a clean sheet all season. But I said, that could be the best individual performance I've seen from a Watford centre-back all season. He was going up against Newcastle's new signing from Burnley, Chris Wood, all match. And Samir, with the exception of the occasional miscommunication, he was winning every aerial ball. He was quick. He was tracking back. There were similar situations to the one against Leicester in the league where the ball was played over the top, where Troost-Ekong let it go over his head. Where Samir, he didn't let anything through. He wasn't taking any risks. He was clearing the ball away. He was just very, very robust, very quick, very strong. It was just defend. I'm not going to try to be extra fancy. I'm just going to do my best to make sure Chris Wood doesn't get the ball. I'm going to do my best to make sure they don't score. I'm not going to overcomplicate it. And he was also good in possession as well when he needed to be. So all three debutants performed really well, I think. I think they're all going to stay in the starting lineup, most certainly. And I think the midfield three, once Lutza comes back, should be Sissoko, Lutza, with Kayembe a bit behind them. And then my final thoughts on the game are, a point is a point. It's better than none, worse than 3. Considering the circumstances, making sure Newcastle couldn't overtake us was definitely huge. We still have 2 matches against Burnley, where hopefully one match will be soon. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but we have 2 matches against Burnley. Those are both 6-pointers. We also play Norwich sometime soon. That's a 6-pointer. So being able to go into a stretch of Burnley and then Norwich, still just above the line, still just with our heads above the water, it's much better than being below Newcastle right now. And so, yeah, it was definitely an interesting performance, because there were definitely the ups, there were definitely the downs. There's parts of us which are saying, maybe Newcastle should have capitalized a bit more, but then there's parts saying maybe we should have capitalized more, so maybe we could have got the 3 points. But yeah, I think the performance overall, I guess I'd say a draw is fair. Maybe we should have finished our chances more in the second half. But the final thought I'll leave with is, I do think individually most players played well. I mean, you could ask a couple questions of Foster because of the questionable distribution at times, and maybe he could have done better. Maybe you could ask questions about him. Cathcart, he had a couple of right passes. He wasn't at his best, but he wasn't terrible. Kutska was probably our worst player that match. I mean, he just really hasn't been able to find the levels he did in his debut match against Aston Villa. He seemed so pedestrian at times. We'd be on counterattacks and he'd just be walking, and it's let's go. We need intensity. Cleverly would fit a lot better there. But with the exception of a couple, I think individually, so many players did it really well. The one catch is there were times it just didn't seem like we were playing as a cohesive unit. Now, that is to be expected in your first match with 3 new signings, players who have come from 3 different leagues. So there's obviously going to be some disjointing, and Joao Pedro hasn't started too many Premier League matches, so you're kind of throwing at it a new system in a pivotal game, because the system is the same, but the players, it's different. But I feel all things considered, the individual performances were good, and the team performances are going to grow as the season goes on, and it was just great to see that fight at the end. It's great to see. You know what? We have to face it. As of now anyway, there's 4 teams in the relegation battle. 3 of the 4 teams are going to go down. One of the teams has a lot of money, so we don't know who else they're going to sign. So relegation is definitely a big possibility. But at least what a match like today shows that if we go down, it's going to be with a fight, and don't count us down just yet. Thank you, and see you soon.